Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in every toxic connection when something changes so softly that only one person truly feels it. You feel it. It is the moment you stop questioning your own mind, the moment clarity arrives and settles into your body. And at the very same time, it is the moment the other person senses that their influence over you is slipping. This is not a story about rage or payback. This is the story of what unfolds when a narcissist becomes aware of their own guilt and how that awareness reshapes their behavior, their sense of control, and the fear they try so hard to hide. If you have ever felt the confusion, the emotional distance, the sudden chill that follows your awakening, stay with me. What you are about to hear may finally put the pieces together in a way that makes sense. Guilt is deeply threatening to a narcissist because their identity is not built on responsibility or self-reflection, but on image. For most people, guilt is uncomfortable, yet it serves a purpose. It acts as an internal signal that something is out of alignment between values and actions, and it invites growth. For a narcissist, guilt operates very differently. It does not simply highlight a mistake. It exposes a weakness in the identity they rely on to function. A narcissist does not experience themselves as a complete and stable person who can be flawed and still worthy of connection. Their identity is more like a performance, fragile and carefully maintained, held together by admiration, control, and the belief that they are superior, justified, or beyond reproach. When guilt appears, it threatens to pull that entire structure apart. Admitting wrongdoing would require admitting limitation, vulnerability, or imperfection. And to a narcissist, that does not feel uncomfortable, it feels unbearable. It feels like psychological destruction. This is why guilt rarely leads them toward remorse. Remorse requires a sense of inner safety, a self strong enough to say, I was wrong and I am still okay. A narcissist does not have that internal foundation. Guilt feels less like a moral reminder and more like a threat to existence. It whispers that they are not who they claim to be, and that message is something they cannot tolerate. So instead of processing guilt internally, they push it outward. They shift blame, twist facts, or attack the source of exposure. The goal is never to repair the damage. The goal is to protect the identity at all costs. This is why accountability is met with such resistance and intensity. They are not defending a single action or choice. They are defending themselves from collapse. Understanding this matters because it explains why logic, proof, or emotional honesty so often fail. You are not discussing behavior. You are challenging a survival system. And when identity feels threatened, self-protection will always overpower conscience. Once their inner image begins to fracture, once they sense that you see through them, their behavior changes almost automatically. They shift. What once appeared as warmth, charm, or confidence begins to harden into something else. This is the stage many people do not recognize until they are already trapped inside it. In the beginning, the narcissist's charm felt natural and easy. It made you feel selected, understood, even safe. But charm was never true closeness. It was a tool. It was the way they gained admiration and influence without revealing anything real or vulnerable. So when guilt exposes them, when they feel that admiration slipping away, charm stops working. It cannot operate on someone who sees clearly. Control takes its place. Their voice changes. Their presence feels heavier. Conversations slowly turn into interrogations. Your words are examined, reinterpreted, and reshaped. Your intentions are questioned, not to understand you, but to dominate the narrative. They may suddenly demand explanations for things that never required explanation before. The aim is simple and calculated: regain psychological footing. If they can control the story, they can avoid confronting the truth. You may notice subtle power moves. Affection is withheld. Confusion is introduced. The rules keep changing so that you are always adjusting, always clarifying, always slightly unsure of where you stand. You find yourself explaining things that once felt obvious, defending feelings that should not need defense. This is not accidental behavior. Control is how they rebuild superiority when their image feels endangered, and this is the part that hurts the most. They do not escalate because you did something wrong. They escalate because you stopped sustaining the illusion. Your awareness disrupted the dynamic, and control is their emergency response. This explains why warmth can suddenly turn cold, or why attention becomes invasive instead of caring. It is not love intensifying. It is monitoring. It is surveillance. They are watching closely for signs that they still matter, still dominate, still own emotional territory. Understanding this frees you from misplaced guilt. The moment charm shifts into control is not your failure. It is proof that you are no longer performing the role they assigned you. And once you see that, their grip weakens, because control only works on someone who believes they need permission to trust their own reality. When control alone no longer restores their sense of power, when your clarity continues to slip through their fingers, they reach for something more aggressive. Denial becomes their armor, and projection becomes their weapon. This is the stage where reality itself becomes unsafe. At this point, the narcissist is not trying to resolve anything. They are trying to survive exposure. Facing the truth would mean facing guilt, and guilt still threatens the identity they are desperately protecting. So instead of acknowledging what happened, they reject the entire premise. Your experiences are minimized, dismissed, or erased. Events are rewritten. Timelines are rearranged. Motives are redefined. And this is often done with confidence rather than hesitation. They speak with certainty because certainty creates doubt in others. When someone denies your lived experience with unwavering conviction, it destabilizes you. You start replaying conversations in your mind. You question your memory. You wonder if you misunderstood something that once felt clear. That confusion is intentional. If they can shake your trust in yourself, they regain control without changing anything about their behavior. Then comes projection. The very traits and actions they refuse to acknowledge in themselves are suddenly assigned to you. You are labeled manipulative, selfish, dramatic, or cruel. Often they use the same words you once used to describe their behavior. This is not accidental. It is psychological displacement. They are transferring their guilt into your identity so they do not have to carry it. What makes this especially painful is how personal it feels. They do not attack at random. They aim directly at your values, your empathy, your intentions. They strike where you care most because that is where doubt cuts deepest. The more honestly you try to explain, the more material they collect to twist. This is where many people begin to lose themselves, not because they are weak, but because they are sincere. They believe that truth will eventually matter. But with a narcissist, denial and projection are not temporary reactions. They are long-term strategies. The moment you understand this, something inside you shifts. You stop arguing with a distorted reflection. You stop seeking validation from someone committed to misunderstanding you. And in that quiet decision not to engage, you begin reclaiming the ground they could only occupy while you doubted your own perception. When denial stops confusing you and projection no longer wounds the way it once did, the narcissist changes tactics again. This time, not to explain or dominate the narrative, but to remove themselves emotionally. Silence, anger, or sudden victimhood replaces accountability, because facing you now would mean facing themselves. Silence is often their first move. Conversations abruptly end. Messages remain unanswered. Emotional warmth vanishes without explanation. This is not space for thought or healing. It is a calculated absence. The aim is to create discomfort, to pull you back into chasing connection, to tempt you to abandon clarity just to restore closeness. Silence becomes a test of how much of yourself you are willing to give up to be acknowledged again. If silence does not work, anger may appear. Not always loud or explosive, but sharp and destabilizing. Anger creates chaos, and chaos distracts from truth. In the presence of rage, the original issue disappears. Suddenly, you are defending your tone, your reaction, your character. Responsibility dissolves into emotional noise. And when anger no longer achieves control, they step into victimhood. They present themselves as misunderstood, attacked, deeply hurt by your honesty. The story flips completely. Your boundaries become cruelty. Your truth becomes betrayal. They speak about how much they have suffered, how unfairly they have been treated, as if your request for accountability was an act of harm. All of these reactions share the same purpose: avoid responsibility while maintaining emotional power. Accountability requires humility, and humility would collapse the identity they are guarding. So instead, they punish truth by withdrawing connection or flooding the space with emotion. This is where the deepest realization begins to form. Their silence, their anger, their tears are not signs that you went too far. They are signs that you reached a place they cannot access. When you stop reacting to these tactics, you step out of the cycle altogether. And in that stillness, you start to understand something essential. Their refusal to take responsibility was never a reflection of your value. It was a reflection of their fear of facing themselves. And when they can no longer silence you, intimidate you, or recast themselves as the injured party, they attempt something even more disturbing. They rewrite the past. They reshape shared history to preserve their image. Moments of harm become misunderstandings. Patterns of control become acts of love. Your pain becomes exaggeration. This rewriting is not about memory. It is about survival. By altering the past, they protect themselves from the guilt that still threatens to break through. And this is often the final confirmation you need, because someone who truly cares does not need to erase reality to feel whole. Not partially, but completely. Because if they can alter the story, they can slip away from the shame that follows. To a narcissist, history is not a fixed record of what truly happened. It is a tool they reshape whenever it threatens them. When guilt starts to rise, memory becomes flexible and slippery. What was once clearly said is suddenly claimed to be misunderstood or taken the wrong way. What was once promised is now reframed as something casual, something never meant seriously. Harm is reduced to a simple misunderstanding. Cruel behavior is rebranded as concern or tough love. Betrayal is explained away as necessity or self-protection. Slowly, quietly, the version of events you lived through is replaced with a new narrative designed only to protect them. This is not confusion or forgetfulness. It is a survival strategy. They repeat the altered story so many times with such confidence and conviction that it begins to sound real even to them. And when you question it, when you gently or firmly challenge it, you are accused of holding grudges, of living in the past, of refusing to let things go. But letting go in their language does not mean healing. It means agreeing to their version of reality and abandoning your own. What makes this especially painful is that you remember the truth very clearly. You remember not just what happened, but how it felt inside your body. You remember the tension, the confusion, the anxiety, the broken trust. You remember the moments when you stayed quiet just to avoid conflict, just to keep the peace, and yet you are told it did not happen that way, or worse, that it never happened at all. This is where many people feel the deepest break inside themselves. Not because of what was done to them, but because their reality is being slowly erased. When someone rewrites history, they are not simply avoiding guilt. They are asking you to give up your own memory to protect their ego. They are asking you to doubt yourself so they do not have to face themselves. And this is where a quiet strength begins to grow in you. You stop trying to correct the story. You begin to see that truth does not need their approval to exist. You realize there is no point arguing facts with someone who is deeply invested in fiction. The moment you trust your own memory again, the rewriting starts to lose its power, because no matter how many versions they invent, they cannot erase one simple truth. You were there. You lived it. You know what you experienced, and choosing to honor that truth is how you slowly step out of their story and back into your own life. When their rewritten version no longer convinces you, when you stop correcting the record and instead stand firmly in what you know, something inside them shifts again. Your clarity becomes the thing that unsettles them the most. Not your anger, not your explanations, not your emotional reactions, your certainty. A narcissist can work with confusion, they can exploit doubt, they can manipulate emotional responses and reactions, but clarity leaves them with nowhere to move. It does not argue, it does not beg, it does not seek permission, it simply exists. And that quiet certainty exposes everything they worked so hard to hide. This is why your calm understanding feels threatening to them. You are no longer asking yourself if you imagine things. You are no longer searching for validation for what you lived through. You are no longer trying to convince them of your reality. And without that engagement, their sense of control begins to weaken. Control depends on reaction, and clarity starves it. They feel this shift almost immediately. You speak less, but when you do speak, your words carry more weight. You respond without emotional charge. You set boundaries without long explanations or justifications. Suddenly, the dynamic they depended on feels unstable and unfamiliar, because clarity signals independence. And independence means they are no longer the authority over your truth. This is often the moment when they begin to escalate in quieter, subtler ways. They may provoke you, bait you, or test you, trying to pull you back into emotional engagement. Not because they want closeness or connection, but because they want reassurance that they still matter, that they still have influence. Your clarity threatens their core belief that they define the emotional landscape. What they fear is not losing you as a person. It is losing their influence over you. At the same time, a quiet transformation is happening inside you. You begin to trust yourself more than their reactions. You stop measuring your reality against their approval. You start to understand that clarity does not require agreement from anyone else. This is why your grounded presence feels like rejection to them, not because you attacked them, but because you withdrew your confusion. And without confusion, manipulation cannot survive. Clarity is not loud. It does not announce itself. It does not try to prove anything. But in the presence of someone who built their power on distortion, it becomes deeply disruptive.